Okay, is this working? Ah. Okay, I think we're finally working, but I need to figure out... Okay. I think... Is it? Please? There we go. Okay. Sorry for the delay here, but welcome to Under Construction. I'm Nathan Curtis, and I'm going to talk about writing puzzles. I know it's been a few months since I've done a stream. Partly that's because I moved during the summer, and so my office setup was pretty... I had to move my office, and my setup was pretty haphazard for quite a while, but now I'm back, and I am ready to talk about puzzles again. And this week, I'm going to be talking about the snake Criss-Cross. Is there... Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what the delay in the... Okay. Let me just adjust the settings so that it's not shrinking the image so much. All right. As I said, I've been setting up my... Not only have I been setting up my office from scratch, but YouTube has changed their studio interface for running live streams and other videos, and I'm still trying to get used to that. So let me see if I can center this better. And to be fair, I don't really understand how my broadcasting software works. I should learn that better. All right, I am now ready to go. I'm going to edit out those first 23 minutes of me not knowing how to stream, but we're going to get going with Under Construction. And this is our 4th episode, and I will be talking about the snake Criss-Cross. The snake Criss-Cross is a variety crossword type. Sorry. I need to edit that. I don't know how that got in there. It is not by me, despite what the presentation just said. Oh, I see. It was just a typo on the first one. All right. It's a variety crossword type devised by Craig Casper. He first developed the type to submit to Will Schwartz's Wordplay, and the first publicly published one appeared in the spring 2015 issue of Will Schwartz's Wordplay, and it is also reprinted in the collection Super Wordplay Crosswords, which is available from Puzzle Right Press. And I got to talk to... so I've done... previously, I've done... formats where which I've borrowed from such puzzle luminaries as Patrick Berry, Mike Shank, Will Shorts, and I have gotten to meet all of those folks at National Puzzlers League conventions and other events. But Craig Casper is someone who I have gotten to meet not only at multiple conventions and the MIT Mystery Hunt, but also we talk frequently online. And so I was able to get a lot more information directly from him than I'm usually able to get in just, a simple email interaction or whatnot. So, what I recall, and Craig was able to confirm this, is that he had initially submitted a puzzle of this type to Wordplay around 2014. And they said, oh, this is a nice format, but the puzzle you gave us is too big and too hard for the level we're aiming at. Can you give us something with a smaller grid? And he said, sure, and made a smaller grid, which eventually appeared in, as I said, spring 2015. But he also brought the original grid that he had submitted as sort of a bonus puzzle to hand out to people at the 2014 National Puzzlers League Convention in Portland, Maine. So that was the first time that I saw it. And then I said, ooh, that's a nice looking format. And I asked Craig if I could use it. And he said, sure, but please wait until the first puzzle has gone out in Wordplay so that I can have, first dibs at that. Which is perfectly reasonable. It's his format, after all. But he was kind enough to let me use it in general. And in a snake Criss-Cross, there are basically two types of entries. You have the Criss-Cross entries, which are basically like a normal Criss-Cross sort of puzzle, not a full crossword where every letter is used both across and down, but one of those looser frameworks where you might have a word list already given and you have to figure out how they go in. And so you have the Criss-Cross entries, which can go across or down in a normal fashion, and snake entries, which are bending paths that are outlined in the grid. And what this means is that, and in the puzzle itself, each set of clues is usually going to be grouped by the answer length and then sorted alphabetically. So you'll have, in the Criss-Cross clues, you'll have all the 3-letter answers starting at A, all the 4-letter answers starting at A, and so forth, and likewise with the snake entries. Every letter is used in one snake entry and 1 or 2 Criss-Cross entries, because if you are at a point where an across Criss-Cross entry crosses a down entry, that's going to be used in that letter is going to be used in 2 different Criss-Cross entries, as well as the snake that covers that particular grid square, which means that some letters are used 3 times, which is not unheard of in variety crosswords, but is certainly not the norm. So here is a sample blank grid for a Criss-Cross, snake Criss-Cross, one that I had made as my first snake Criss-Cross sometime in the latter part of 2015. And it's hard to tell immediately what to do with this, but when it's solved, it will look something like this, where you have, at least in the zoomed out version, you should at least be able to see that there are entries going across and down. For instance, in the upper left corner, we have attention going across and ALF going down. And then attention also has tax going down from it, and so forth. But I'm going to zoom in to the upper third of the puzzle or so. And, excuse me, hopefully you can have a better idea of how the snakes interact with the Criss-Cross entries. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see that the leftmost part of attention and ALF together make the word flatten, starting by going up from the F and then turning to the right at the A. The second half of attention overlaps with the snake entry vexation, which starts at the V near the upper left and has a few bends on its way, passing through ever, expenses, and tax before ending at the end of attention. And so, in turn, expenses is made of the EX from vexation and part of open sesame. Those are the 2 snake entries that overlap to form expenses, and so forth. And it's an interesting solving experience, I've found. You could, theoretically, just solve it as a crisscross if you had enough certainty about what each of the crisscross answers were from the clues, and you wanted to solve it just, a crisscross is essentially a logic puzzle that uses words instead of numbers or symbols that you might see in a Sudoku or battleships or other puzzle like that. The logic is we have these words and the letters, when they cross, must be the same. And so you could solve it like that, but for one thing, that requires being sure of all of the crisscross entries from their clues the very first time, and it requires knowing all of them and doing a lot of logic that, especially at the scale of some of these puzzles, would not be enjoyable. But when you have the snake answers as well, you can start to look for, well, okay, there aren't that many 9-letter crisscross entries in this grid. The one that's in the upper left, it might be attention, it might be something else. I don't see any other 9-letter words in this particular blown up portion of the grid, but there may be some others. And so you look and say, okay, we have a 9-letter word that overlaps part of an 8-letter snake at this end and a 7-letter snake at the left end. And you find that, we can turn attention into flatten and something ending in TION. That could be vexation. And so you have this back and forth between the snake answers and the crisscross answers as you solve. And then from a constructing point of view, I have found that constructing one of these is rather similar to the process I go through when I write a Pathfinder, which is one of my most frequently used formats. And I'll probably talk about the Pathfinder on a later episode. But hopefully this gives you a sense of how the answers overlap in a snake crisscross. And again, I will, before I move on, just notice that in that upper left entry, attention, in the upper left corner, that A appears in three different words. It appears in attention, in alf, and in flatten. The T, the third T in attention, also appears in 3 entries, in attention, tax, and vexation. Most of the other letters, in fact, all of the other letters in attention, are in 2 words. The one crisscross entry, attention, and whichever of the snakes crosses that particular letter. So it will always cross at least 2 letters and sometimes cross 3 letters. And so that's the basic idea of how the grid works, but we also have some general parameters and conventions that tend to be followed. So for the grid, you're going to have a crisscross grid of interlocking words that go across and down. This is a pretty familiar puzzle format on its own. And you generally follow typical crisscross guidelines for that. At least 1/3 of the letters in most of those entries should be checked by one going in the opposite direction. Not opposite, the perpendicular direction. But not always. If you go back to the example that I gave, over there in attention, attention is a 9-letter word, but only 2 crisscross entries going down cross it at the A in attention and the third T. That is fine, though, because all of those letters are going to be checked by the snakes that cover them. But it's still a good idea to have as much of a triple check in these as you can. Especially, I really try to avoid it now, but in this particular example, say, where I have flatten at the left of attention, there's just so many letters that only connect to the rest of the grid at that T, and in a lot of these variety puzzles where you have overlapping words instead of just intersecting words, the solver can sometimes get to a point where they know that these 2 answers have 5 letters that are going to be the same, but they don't know any of those letters. and it can be more challenging compared to filling in a missing word in a conventional crossword. So for that reason, I try to have as much interlock in the crisscross portion as I can, and preferably at least 1/3 of the letters in each of these crisscross entries. And the outer dimensions of this puzzle can vary. So a 15 by 15 outer dimension would be pretty small. You might be able to fit both the grid and the clues on a single page. 15 by 20 is sort of medium. You can have the grid and the clues on a 2-page spread. The puzzle that Craig Casper first published in Wordplay magazine and subsequently in the collection is, I believe, 15 by 19. 20 by 20 is pretty big. You can put the grid and clues on a 2-page spread, but you might need to do some tight formatting to get it all to fit in, either some small font sizes or small margins. And I tend to prefer having larger font sizes and margins when I can to make it more readable when it's in print. And if you are going bigger than about 20 by 25, it's going to be very big, and you might even need to go into 3 pages to get it to all fit. And part of this includes the fact that you're going to probably want to include instructions at the top of the first page if you are publishing this, since it is not yet a standard and familiar puzzle type. And then for the conventions for the entries, 3-letter minimum for crisscross entries. So this is similar to crosswords or ordinary crisscross entries. Sometimes you need to have some short entries just to be the mortar that holds the longer brick words together. Although I'm now alluding to a different puzzle type, bricks and mortar, which I have not constructed myself. I tend to prefer a 5-letter minimum for the snake entries, partially because I want the snake entries to actually be snakes and make some interesting shapes, and it's harder to do that with fewer than 5 letters. Occasionally, if I am in a jam, or there's something that will really help me with a 4-letter snake entry, I'll use 1 or 2. I published a snake crisscross on my Patreon on, I guess, Wednesday night, and it had a single 4-letter snake entry, and I wanted to try to find at least one more 4-letter entry to go in there so that it wasn't just sticking out like that. But in the end, it really seemed to make sense on its own, and it allowed me to have a really nice long crisscross entry in a place that would have otherwise been pretty blank in terms of not having any letters in that region. And so I went with that. The crisscross entries will always read left to right or top to bottom, at least in English. I suppose if you're doing a snake crisscross in Hebrew or Arabic, then they will read right to left or top to bottom, and possibly in other languages it might even be different. You could also theoretically have a snake crisscross in which the crisscross entries could go either left to right or right to left, either top to bottom or bottom to top, and you have to figure that out for each individual entry. That would be a lot more difficult to solve based on how you break into a puzzle with finding overlaps between different entries. But could be an interesting challenge. Snake entries should bend at least once. I say should, they don't have to all bend. In fact, in the first snake crisscross that Craig Casper published in Wordplay magazine, one of the entries was, in fact, one of the snake entries, I think, just was completely straight, read from right to left, and overlapped with some part of a crisscross entry. But I like to have the snakes bend, otherwise they don't seem as snaky. And parts of some snake entries should read right to left or upwards, because all of the crisscross entries are going to be reading left to right and up to down, having some that go left to right, right to left, or upwards will provide some reverse overlaps. You don't need to go bend over backwards to have all reverse overlaps in your puzzle, but it's more interesting if you have a good assortment of forward overlaps and backwards overlaps. So let me talk about the strategy that I usually use when I'm constructing one of these. So start with a seed entry, and there are at least two possible ways to pick a seed entry. You can choose one long entry that you want to build off of, which could be either a Criss-Cross entry or a snake entry. Or you could take a pair of entries, a snake and a Criss-Cross entry, that have some kind of interesting overlap. If you notice something like, when you realize that Obamacare and Macarena overlap in 6 letters, that's the sort of thing where you might then say, okay, what can I do with that? And so you start by deciding that one of them is going to be a Criss-Cross entry and the other one's going to be a snake entry, and figuring out what else can go around that. And once you have your seed, decide how to lay it out, especially when you have a single snake entry. You want to make sure that it has some interesting bends in it and is used in different ways. So looking for interesting places for your snake entries to turn. Often, if you have a long snake or Criss-Cross entry, which is a compound word or a phrase of 2 or more words, you might want to try to figure out a way to overlap whatever the overlapping word is, that it doesn't break in the same place. Because you want to have, you don't want the entries to be too similar. You certainly don't want to use the same long word as part of both the snake entry and the Criss-Cross entry, and so part of that is trying to make sure that they break in different places. And then you want to build off of your existing entries. You basically make the grid as you go. You're going to be filling in the Criss-Cross entries into a grid, and when you think you have a completed snake entry, you sort of mark the boundaries of the snake entries, usually with some bold lines. I use graph paper usually. I'm going to be doing it in a spreadsheet in just a few moments. And sometimes when you have placed a snake entry, you'll have some partial entries of potential Criss-Cross words. And so you can think of how you can complete those. But you can also take a completed Criss-Cross word and then build a new Criss-Cross word that is intersecting it at a right angle. And so sometimes just creating a completely new branch that out of what you already have. You should have an approximate grid size in mind, and I'm going to stress this as we go on. And as you get to the grid size that you want to try to finish up the Criss-Cross entries that are close to the edge of the grid. Some things to watch out for when doing a snake Criss-Cross that I've found. First off, remember that the letters at the intersections of the Criss-Cross grid are used 3 times. This is sometimes helpful because I sometimes get into situations where I have an overlap that wouldn't work if that letter couldn't do double duty in both of the Criss-Cross answers. Like if that letter had to be doubled in the snake, it would cause me a problem. But you can't really plan for that as easily. But what you often have is that when you have, if you're somebody like me who often uses dictionary searches to try to come up with ways to fill in a corner or something, getting the right constraints to say how to fill these letters can be trickier. Often I'll just, because you have two different strings that overlap in a single letter in the crisscross portions of the grid, that can be very tricky. Every time your snake entry turns, those intersections will just make the search queries more complicated, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a drawback, but it's something that you have to keep in mind. And sometimes I will do a complicated search, sift through the results, find one that I like, and then realize that I had expressed the search the wrong way, and it doesn't actually work for the grid. Also, when a snake entry turns at an intersection, it doesn't split the way that that the overlaps in some variety crosswords do. And what I mean is that because that letter that is at the turning point is in both an across crisscross entry and a down crisscross entry, you can't get around things like having a weird letter combination in your snake and just saying, oh, I'll put the things up to the first letter of that weird combination in one crisscross entry, and I'll put everything after it in another crisscross entry. So, for example, if I often try to put snake-related entries as part of my seed for a grid. If you were trying to use Diamondback as a snake entry, you have the letter combination in there DB, which is not that common in words. It pretty much has to be the break in a compound word or phrase. And sometimes you can say, well, I'll just put MOND in one word and BACK in another word. But no, one of the crisscross words is going to have a D next to a B. It could be that it's DB, or it could be that it's BD, because it could go in reverse. But you're going to have to use that letter combination in one of your crisscross words. And the most common problem that I run into when writing a snake crisscross is grid sprawl. It is very easy to come up with new snakes to branch off from the existing crisscross words and so forth. And so you can wind up with a grid that is just too large to feasibly print out. So the grid size will go quickly. So what you really need to do is have a rough grid size in mind. I had some general guidelines for different dimensions of the overall outer grid size, and you want to sort of stick to those. Pick one and try to stick to that as much as you can. And so one thing that means is if you wait until you have reached, if you're trying to say make a 20 by 20 and you wait until your grid is in fact 20 letters tall, you may realize, oh, I still have some unfinished crisscross entries at the edge of the grid that I can't just leave there because they're not full words yet. Which means your grid is going to be bigger than your anticipated size. So you have to keep in mind when you're getting close to your size. If you're looking for a 20-letter grid, you want to start thinking about the edges once you start getting to like 16, 17, 18 letters. And there's some room to fudge these. A 20 by 20 grid is not that much different in size from a 19 by 21 grid. There may be some issues about formatting if you have a certain amount of horizontal and vertical space to deal with. And again, if that is a constraint that you need to keep in mind, then you want to be aware of that as you're working. And then there are the things that after you finish the grid, you need to do to make the puzzle actually finished. I'm not going to go over them now. We're not going to go over them when we construct, probably, just to save on time, but you want to lay out the grid in a format that you can actually put into your printed form or digital form. You can use a spreadsheet or a graphic program. This is one where even though it's a square, a rectangular-based grid, using a table in a word processor is usually going to be very painful because you have to do a lot of you have to add a lot of borders, and most word processors that I've used don't do irregular borders well at all. I can do it in Excel. I can do it in Inkscape or a graphics program. I do not ever want to have to try to do it in Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or anything like that. You want to make sure you make thick outlines for all the snake entries. It's a good idea to lightly shade the enclosed regions of blank squares so that they don't get confused for part of the crisscross grid. Just a light shade of gray is fine. You're going to write the clues, and as you write the clues, you want to group your entries by answer length, well, also by answer type, crisscross or snake, and then answer length, and then sort them alphabetically. This is all to give the by length is to help people help solvers know that, you know, A, they've got a right answer, and B, know what possible entry slots that entry could go into, because there is no indication given in the puzzle of where any particular answer goes. If you have a 6-letter answer, you know that it can go in a 6-letter crisscross slot or a 6-letter snake slot, and so that helps you to narrow things down. And then sorting them alphabetically helps solvers to confirm solutions as they're working. Test and edit. You're always going to want to test and edit your puzzle before you send it out into the world and then publish it. All right, so that is it for the introduction. In just a second, I'm going to jump in and start working on a grid. Need to take a break because I'm a little bit hoarse, but that's just a drink of water. All right. So now I'm going to switch over to Chrome and the spreadsheet. Again, I need to blow this up. And I'm going to zoom in. And let's also blow it up in the studio. I apologize for the technical difficulties here. It's a bit of a struggle to figure out the software after some time off. All right. Hopefully this is big enough that you'll be able to make out at least what I'm putting in the grid. Actually, I'm going to see if I can zoom into the grid a little bit more. All right. And drag that. All right, you're not going to be able to see the full grid at once, although you might not need to see the full outlined grid here. So what I've done is I have in advance set up a potential sort of canvas. It's about 27 by 27, I think. I want to make a puzzle that is at most 20 by 20 here. But I don't know in advance, you know, I'm going to start with a seed and put it down, and I don't know if that's going to wind up in the upper left, the middle, the lower left, upper right. It could wind up being almost anywhere in the grid. And so in order to make sure that I can have enough room to keep the grid on my canvas, I'm making the canvas larger than I need it to be. And in order to see how close I am to filling that canvas, up here in the upper right, I will highlight these and make them a little bit more visible. No, not text color. No. Right. I meant to do text highlight, not text color. Do the text highlights in, I don't know, cyan. So now I've got up in the upper right portion of the spreadsheet, I have two values marked C and R for columns and rows. And I have some spreadsheet formulas, which were some of which were kindly provided to me by my friend Ken Levin, who is my spreadsheet guru for puzzling things that need spreadsheet wizardry. And so he set up a formula out on the up top and left sides of this canvas. You see a bunch of zeros. Those zeros are basically counting. It's a Boolean formula that will give me either 0 or 1. 0 if there are no letters in the canvas in that row or column, and a 1 if there is one or more letters in that column. And then over in the C and R, up on the upper right, those are counting the number of rows or columns that have letters in them. And I then applied some conditional formatting to them so that as they get close to 20, the highlighting color of the numbers will change to let me know that I should pay attention and try to work on getting the edges of the grid done. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, that's fine. So first off, I'm going to want to start with a seed. Now I've done I wrote about half of the grid ahead of time so that I can sort of speed through the first half of it. So I decided that I was going to start with a single seed entry. I like to have snake-related entries in my snake crisscrosses. It's not a requirement. It's just something I like to do. Just like Patrick Berry likes to have flower references in his rose gardens and whatnot. And so I've had seed entries like Diamondbacks or Cobra, or the most recent one that I published, the theme entry, was Ouroboros, which had some lovely overlaps in it. Really like that. But I was realizing that in each of those times, I was using the snake-related word as a crisscross entry, which seems like it's the opposite of how it should be. So I decided that this time I would make my snake-related entry actually be a snake entry. So it is going to curve around. And if you remember when I said that if you have a snake entry like Diamondback, you're going to have the DB be consecutive letters in one of the crisscross entries, no matter how you try to make the snake turn. So we're going to want something that doesn't have a very unusual bigram in it that will later come around to bite us. You don't want to get snake bitten here. And so I decided that my seed entry was going to be the classic Samuel L. Jackson movie, Snakes on a Plane. And as I started writing down the letters, I said, okay, the very beginning of snake, S-N-A-K, you don't want to have it overlapping snake. You could do something like naked, but I decided that I would have that part of the word go in reverse, because the first four letters of snake, S-N-A-K, you reverse them, you get K-A-N-S. That could be something about Kansas City, Arkansas, and so forth. So I'm going to pick a starting point, roughly in the middle of the grid. I'm actually not doing it exactly in the middle of the grid because I know, since I did about half the grid before, I know a little bit about what directions the grid is going to expand in. So, but I'm going to start with S-N-A-K. Actually, let me change the formatting here so that all of my letters in the canvas are centered in their cells, just to make them a bit easier to read. All right, so we have snakes. Now, snakes on a plane is a pretty long entry, something like 14 letters or so. And so, you know, if I start with the SNAK, I pretty much have to then turn at the E. The only thing that I could think of off the top of my head that has EKANS, besides the Pokemon whose name is Snake backwards, is Topekans, residents of the capital of Kansas, and that's not as fun an entry as Kansas itself. So we're going to have the snake turn at the K. If we went left, we'd probably have a Criss-Cross entry that has EK, and probably even more than that, SEK in it. SEK is not a very good letter combination for that appears in a lot of words. You might have close-knit or something, but you have very few options. So I'm going to say, all right, let's start by going to the right now. So snakes, and we have KES, which can easily be the end of a word, like brakes, as in a car, the things that slow down a car, not to fracture something, or takes, or mistakes. You have options there. But if we continued this further, KESO, again, not a good letter combination for words, so we're going to bend again. And I decided, and at this point you could say, well, we could bend it down, we could bend it up. I decided that if we bent down here, we would be getting close to the start of the word as well, and that could cause problems when we need to make the turn after that. So to give myself a little more room for the snake to grow without biting its own tail, so to speak, we're going to start by going up. O, N, A, and that's about as high as I think I can go and still have a reasonable set of letters to work with. I didn't want to turn immediately here either, just in case I wanted to do something like Arkansas in front of Kansas, although it will turn out that I won't be able to do that anyway. But if I put a P after it, then there's not that much I can do. Right now, there's things like pianos and so forth. I originally said, oh, I can do volcanoes. And then I looked it up and realized that volcanoes is usually pluralized with an ES. And so I had to scrap that. And I'm not going to go through that whole false path here, but we'll just assume that we picked the right path for now. So PL. I decided that I'm going to do that. I liked the ALPA better than I would than APLA. In part because you have things like alpaca, Al Pacino, and so forth. And now, if we then turn down, we're close enough to the end that we probably wouldn't get in trouble immediately. To go, maybe if we went down A and E. But then you look at this at where the A and E is starting to come close to the KES. You really want a vowel to come before the KES, unless it's a word that starts KES, like kestrel or kesha. And so you're going to probably have something that ends in A-N-E-I, A-N-E-A, A-N-E-O. Those are not good endings, and I couldn't really find anything that made me happy with those. So I said, all right, let's go upwards instead. And there are some words that end in ENA, like arena and so forth. So Sure, I'm reasonably happy with this placement for now. So I am going to take this, and I'm going to color each snake for now, rather than trying to do the borders. I think that will show up more better on the screen, and is easier to do than borders. But this will just say this one is one snake. And if any adjacent snakes, I'll have to pick a different color to highlight them in. All right, so that's a start. We've laid out the first entry. I then decided to look at ALPA. I said, as I said before, it could be alpaca or it could be Al Pacino. Al Pacino is a nice answer, and also I've done enough spiral puzzles and similar things that I know that Al Pacino has some very nice backwards overlaps. If I were to fill in CINO for Al Pacino, then the snake entry that goes here, if it goes backwards through through those letters, it will end in ONIC, which is nice. You have things like harmonic or tonic or sonic. And I sort of started extrapolating, well, sonic, supersonic. And so I said, okay, if I do supersonic, supersonic has a nice, even though it's a forward overlap, the PERSO of supersonic looks like it would be something about person or personal. And then US to finish supersonic, and we have some nice beginnings of more overlaps. So I will highlight these in a new color. Now, as I said before, I had originally planned to have the word volcanoes going into the ANOS of snakes on a plane. But that's not the right spelling of the plural, so I had to come up with a plan B there. I looked at some different words that ended with ANOS, and there weren't as many as I originally thought. There's pianos, but that is either going to have, if you put pianos here, you're either going to have a snake entry that ends in PI or one that begins in IP, and neither of those is very fruitful. There are some entries, but not a lot, and you'll want to give yourself options here. And then I was looking through the results in a dictionary search and remembered, oh, there's something that is pretty familiar to a lot of people these days that ends in ANOS that I'm not going to find in any of these dictionaries. Thanos, the villain in the Avengers Infinity War movie. And I said, okay, it's not going to be feasible to have a snake entry that begins HT, but one that ends in TH is going to be pretty easy to find. And then I decided that I wanted to sort of scooch over to the left, and some of this may have been due to decisions I had made when I put volcanoes in and whatnot. But I then decided, okay, I'll scooch to the left. And if I bump the end of snakes on a plane over, I could still have this ENA here for arena or whatever, but I could have Edith going here. So I'm going to color that in a new color. And need to displace the end of snakes on a plane. And in fact, if I have something like arena, it could be more than just Edith. It could be Meredith. I can think of more Ediths off the top of my head, but there's still Burgess Meredith. Is a fine Meredith to use in an entry, and I'm sure there's people whose first names are Meredith that are just not coming to mind. Right. So MER, that's a good ending for lots of words. The EN that I've now built here in at the end of Snakes on a Plane can also be the end of a lot of words. So what am I going to put up in on top of Rena? If I just have arena, I have an issue where this is going to come up a lot when you're doing a snake crisscross or something like that. Suppose that I did have just arena here, and I'm going to call this snake yellow. In order to make this a full snake, it's going to have to go off in some direction. It's going to have to go off to the right. That, I don't know why it opened a... All right, let's see if it will do that again. Okay, yes, now it works. So I'm going... and if we imagine that we're at the top of the grid, specifically, we would have to go a long way before this can turn. We might be able to turn here and turn this into edits. Or we might have to have... make it go even further over. No, really? And maybe do something like that. Those are definitely possibilities, but they're tricky to do and kind of limiting. So I thought, well, okay, if I want this answer to be not just arena, it could certainly be Serena, as in Serena Williams. It could be a particular name of an arena, but with a few exceptions, I generally don't. You know, there are a few sports stadiums that I think are famous enough to have as the answer to a question, but I couldn't think of anything that was currently called an arena that I wanted to use. But I also said, what if it's not an arena, but a Macarena? Macarena. And I now realize that I had mentioned Macarena as a possible seed entry before going with Obamacare. That was entirely coincidental. And I said, all right, this could be, Macarena could now be part of two different snakes. We could have the AC in one snake and the M in another. But what if this is part of a single snake? And I just said, what if we have it going upwards here so that it has, oh no. I then said, okay, so what if this is part of a single snake? And I looked at possibilities for it going both upwards and downwards. So upwards is going to have ACAM in a row. Downwards is going to have MACA. And at first I wasn't happy about MACA because most of the things A are going to look similar, even if they're not actually the same word. Things like macaw or Macau or macaque, the monkey. I would definitely not use the variation on that was used as a racial slur in the Virginia was a Senate campaign a few years ago, and I long for the days when using a word like that actually was a liability, but I'm not going to politicize too much today. Anyway, so I had these things that started with MACA, like macaw and whatnot, and I wasn't too thrilled with them. But then I realized that, if I put it in the middle of something, I can have something like Panama Canal. And I said, okay, Panama Canal is nice. So if it's going to have the MACA here, we're going to have to end with canal here. And so I put that in and I said, uh-oh, well, I'm going to have to extend that so we can have analog overlapping that. And then we're going to have the beginning of Panama up near the M. It's going to have to turn at the M. If it then goes, if it comes in from the left, we're going to have something similar to Panama there. We could put, say, in retrospect, I could have put Pan Am like that and just had Pan Am, the defunct airline. But I decided that I would go like make it turn the other way, And so we have something ending in man. And in fact, we could turn again and have it not quite intersect itself. But if we do that, we can get something ending in man, or beginning with man, or just having man in it. It's a very versatile set of 3 letters there. And then I'm going to put, I don't usually do this, I'm going to put a border letter right there just to indicate that this is where the word intersects itself, turns around and becomes Napa, which could be either the cabbage or the wine-growing valley in California. I suspect that the valley is more well-known, at least, to American solvers. So now I'm looking at this, and I said, okay, something with man, that has a lot of options. Something ending in MER, a lot of options. Something ending in EN, that has a lot of options. But over here in analog, I now have this OG, and there are certainly ways that we could have done that. That we can do this. We could go, we could have an entry that comes in from the top and has OG at the end or in the middle. We could have an entry that does that in reverse, maybe starts with GO and then goes up to the top. But we have this empty space here, this sort of 3x3 square right now, to the north of Al Pacino, to the west of Supersonic, and so forth. And I think it would be the only way we're going to be able to put anything in there is to have something that does, in fact, go up to this GO. So I said, all right, let's put in something, I'll mark it with question marks. Something here that goes in with that goes from the G to the I of Supersonic and Al Pacino. And this could be something that gets extended on either side, but it's got, at least whatever we put here has got to be a reasonable word, or a reasonable middle of a word. And this had, and I suppose I could have approached this in multiple ways, in other ways. I could have said, well, what if it's a longer word, and so we might have 1 or 2 letters on the other side of that OG, and I probably could have found something that I hadn't considered in my initial searches. But just looking at things that ended GO and what their possibilities were, I decided to go with cargo, which gives us GRACI, which has a few possible continuations, which I'll get to in a moment. Let's color this one. Let's give it a nice shade of purple. Actually, no, I'm going to make all these letters bold to stand out better against the colors. All right, so then I said, so now we have cargo here, and I did for a moment think about, oh, I could extend this. The one thing that I remember from another spiral I wrote is that, unfortunately, would be a duplication here, which is why I didn't use it, but you could do something like cargo plane, which is, cargo plane, a plane that moves cargo is, I think, enough of a thing to be used as an entry. And we would have Alpo, the pet food brand, going down from it. But since we already have snakes on a plane and a different snake, I don't want to have a plane that doesn't have snakes on it, which is not my usual MO for travel, but for this grid, I think is good to keep in mind. So now I have this GRACI, which does have some possibilities, but is relatively limited. And I thought about a few options that I might have for that. One is, and again, remember that GRACI could be at the beginning of a word. It could also be in the middle of a word. It's probably not going to go at the end of the word. But So one possibility I tried was drag racing. In the gerund form, I would probably have to clue it in the automotive sense rather than the RuPaul show on television. But this is, at least at first, a possibility. But if you look down at the bottom of that, the NG, we can't turn or go horizontally from the N because it will create two-letter words in one direction or another. So that means that we're either going to need to begin this snake with NG, which is not good, or it's going to have to end in GN. And I did look through some possibilities for ending in GN, which might have worked, but nothing really stuck there. I couldn't get it to do quite what it needed to do there. So I said, nah, I'll leave that be. I won't do drag racing. Gracious was a possibility, but before I did that, I wanted to try what about if Gracie is part of someone's name? The most famous Gracie I could think of was Gracie Allen. And this has some promise. You know, you could have something that starts with EA, but since there isn't really anything that begins EAL, you would have to turn at the A. Which, again, would cause some problems with what's going to have to happen with the continuation of Perso. I'm not going to go through all of the possibilities of that, but I didn't come up with anything that really worked there. We could have something that ends in AE, which is not the best ending, but, you know, it's a sort of Latin plural ending, and we have this LAE, LLEE. I had something that I really liked, and I'm going to have to remember where I made it, curve. Oh, right. I briefly tried having here the word tessellai. I'm going to lightly shade that. Now, a tessella is a word for a tile in a mosaic. And what I really liked about that is that you have the perso and the TES of tessellai, and you can join those together to make impersonates, which is a nice long word that does some interesting crosses there. But then I realized that usually the word for at least in modern usage, the word for a tile in a mosaic is usually tessera with an R instead of an LL. And although tessella does show up in words like tessellation, it's not the more common one. And I looked at how often the word tessellai was used, and it was not enough. So I then said, all right, we'll get rid of tessellai, and I tried other options for Gracie Allen, and it didn't work. If you try to do just Gracie, you're going to run into the problem that you can't do anything with the E, because you can't, if it ends the word Gracie, you can't go down. And so you're going to have to go horizontally, and again, you'll have a two-letter word somewhere. So, not Gracie. It occurs to me that, what's the name of the production company for The Simpsons? Gracie Films? Gracie Productions? I don't remember exactly, what the name of the production company is, but something with Gracie in it. I could have used that, but I decided against it. So I said, all right, I have exhausted the other possibilities. I'll go with gracious. And now we have OUS. That's going to have to be the beginning of a word, because I'm not feeling great about finding a word that ends with OUS. Then it's going to have to turn unless we do graciously, but even then you're not going to have a word that starts OUSL or OUSLY. So we're going to have to turn there. OUS, that's pretty much going to be variations on oust. So we have oust, but I want something longer than that because I want at least 5 letters in my snakes when I can manage. And so at that point you could have ousts, which would have to turn down, unless you have something like Saint Simon or whatever. And if you do turn down, then you have something like Czar or Tsunami starting with TS. I don't like ousts. Ousted, unless you turn at some point. STED is not a good beginning. Ouster works. You could have stern or sterling, or you could have ousting. And as in many of these variety puzzles, it's often really nice to be able to use common word suffixes and prefixes like ing, ed, re, and so forth, in ways where they're used differently in whatever word overlaps with them. So if we have ousting here, we now have sting as the beginning of a Criss-Cross word. It also means that whatever we have here with KES is going to have to end at KES. You might, if you're so inclined, want to mark the that border with a gray shading or something. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. But we can still have lots of words that end in KES, lots of words that begin with sting. And but now we have run into a position where whatever is coming off of supersonic, that's going to have to end in one letter unless it can use the I. And I didn't find anything that I particularly liked using the I. So I said, all right, we'll just have something. It might just be person, or it might be a particular word that ends in person, layperson, chairperson, and so forth. And then build something off of that might come down and come over to the end of sting. And you have a few possibilities for that. You could have stinger, and then something that has RE and comes through to the N. Or you could have stingray and have something that, has some of this, maybe just the R or the AR coming over to the N. In the end, I did a few searches and found that the one I liked best was stingy coming up with the word yeoman. And that gives us Nemo going across, which is a perfectly cromulent entry. And then we have something ending that would end in OEY, which is not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I immediately thought of Joey, but then we would have to have something starting with J and going to the right. But I just did a search to make sure that I wasn't overlooking something, and I found things like hooey and fooey, and I liked fooey as an interjection there. And then I said to myself, all right, with fooey we can put in, if we have something that comes in from this R here over to the P and then goes on, amphora is a word that has PHO in it, and oh look, it gives us a nice ramp, and ORA, which can easily be the beginning of oral or orate or oration. So let's put that in blue. Now, at this point, one of my conditional formatting numbers up in the upper right has gone off. The C, the number of columns, has turned to green when it reached 15. I said it would be green when I was 15 to 17, yellow when I was 18 to 20, and red if I was over 20, because I really didn't want to go bigger than 20. So at this point, I want to start thinking about at least the left and right boundaries, and we're also getting close to the point where we want to think about the up and down boundaries. But first we need to work on left-right. We're at 15. I don't want to go more than 20. If I then look at this, I say, all right, on the right-hand side, I have ORA. I could put in oral for one letter, or I could put in orate for 2 letters. I probably prefer orate to oral here because having the 2 letters there gives me a little bit more freedom in the crossing, in how the crossings are going to be laid out. So that's 1 or 2 letters there. I'll leave that orate in there. Or I could put in orange or something even longer, but since we're getting close to 20 columns, I don't want to make it too long. On the other end, we have the MER in the leftmost column. And you could put an O there for Omer, which is the days before a particular Jewish holiday that I don't remember, and apologies to my Jewish friends for not remembering it. But I wasn't thrilled with that as an accessible entry for everyone. Before you complain, I have the same reservations towards using words from pretty much any religious tradition that would not be widely known outside that tradition. So we could have Omer, but if I don't want that, then again, I want at least 2 letters there, like maybe Homer. Not saying we're going to put Homer in there, but as a possibility. That brings us up to 19 letters. We're in the yellow now. I have only 1 more letter that I could possibly put on either side, so I'm going to say, all right, I would rather err on the low side of 20 just so that this isn't too big. So this makes me inclined to say, all right, that's enough on these sides. So what I'm going to do, and I might end up extending it by 1 column in either direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these columns and I'm going to shade them in a darker shade of gray, just to discourage myself from using them. And then I'm going to take out the parts that I put in initially on either side, the Homer and orate, just because I might have other ways of filling those. And then think about what to do around there. So I decided to stick with the right-hand side for now. And as I said, I might have something like orate here. Don't want to go further than orange or orator. And I've got up in the orange, I've got PUS, which is going to have to be something. And the first thing that came to mind was pushover, which is nice because it has hover, which although has a meaning which is similar to over, and that it means something about vertical positioning, I don't think it's directly related to over. It now occurs to me that there might be some sort of weird etymological connection through hyper to hover, but if there is, I'm going to say that is far enough removed that I'm not going to worry. Now, I don't just want it to be hover, because I want it to be able to turn. So it could be hovers, or hovered, or hovering. Hovercraft is not going to work so well. because we're going to have the RCR, and that's probably going to cause problems. But I decided, okay, if I do hovering, again, I can do something where if it goes down, I can use the ing in a different way. That's now going to meet up with whatever I have coming off of ORA. So if I put that in purple, and I then said, okay, what possibilities do I have for something that has RINGE in it? And there were a few things. There was, fringe, fringes, fringed. There are things about ringers or ringed something or others for the names of animals. And then I found some things that had ended in ENT, like ringent, which I didn't really like by itself, or stringent or astringent. I said, okay, that would put ENT down here. And now we're starting to have a nice beginning of a word here, just with the orate that we have in place. We have tent, which can be some word relating to tents. It could be tenth. Well, tenth wouldn't work too well. There's one way we could make tenth work. We could put the H going to the left, and then we could have IG in the to complete the word 8, crossing 10th, which would be interesting, and if I had thought of that, I might have gone for it. But I looked through other words that started with tent, and I found tentacle, which gives cat all by itself, and then the promising letter beginning letter combinations CLE. So I'll shade in tentacle. And up top, we're going to have something. I said I didn't like ringent by itself, but stringent or astringent will work. And we want to have some stuff up in the upper right no matter what, even if we had just had ringent, because we're going to have to go as high as the row where we have MAN, man, in it already, and having this whole space on the upper right be completely empty is it's aesthetically displeasing and feels like you could have put something there without much effort, especially because if it's a case where you don't have to change any of the existing words, you can just add on new branches to whatever the crisscross words are already there. So then I said, all right, what if we have something that is over here with stringent, or astringent? You're going to have this ST. If we have astringent, it takes us all the way to the top of the row that's occupied by man already. If we do that, we would have to have either something that begins with TSA, like czar, but in order to make it long enough, it would have to be something like czarina, and we're getting into letter combinations that don't look very promising when they're turned around backwards, or czardom, which gives us modra, or czarist. And even if these words bent in a second place to turn, you're not going to get good word endings there. So, okay, scratch that. What if it is going to the right and then down instead of going backwards? What if it ends in AST? And I found one that I kind of liked, abreast, which could cross with La Brea. But that ran into problems where I tried to figure out what to do next. If we have either breast or abreast, if we say that these are going to be yellow, if it's abreast, we're then going to have to make a turn somewhere, AL, and we need to make sure that the word is that the crisscross word is at least 3 letters and the snake word is at least 5 letters. If we have it turned down at the A or the L, it's going to have to run into the pushover, the crisscross word, and stop there, and it will be too short. If we have it go up, the problem is that our grid may get to be a little bit too long, especially since we still have to put AS at the minimum at the bottom of Kansas. So I didn't like La Brea, and the problem persists whether you have breast or abreast here. I suppose with abreast you could have something that extends one row higher, but again, I liked having this top row being of man and whatever else is in it being kind of flush and being the top. So I didn't like that. And so I decided, all right, let's not use abreast or breast and La Brea. Let's just use the ST, since both stringent and astringent are words. And I looked for something that could, I then looked for something that could basically come off of it and then going to the right in these question marks and then turning down, but would also start maybe in, say, one of these spots above the S or the H, and then go up and then turn and then come down to the ST. You could theoretically also do it coming off of the connecting to the O in pushover or the U in pushover, but then you're going to have a lot harder time making words that end in O or U than you will with S or H. So I looked for words that could either come off of the S or the H, and what we know about that is that the ST, it's going to have to end in ST to make stringent. With the S and T, I wasn't too worried about how the words started, especially if it is long enough to reach the S, because you can just pluralize almost anything. But the middle letters, if you cut off the first letter above the S and the T at the end, will also make a word. And looked at a lot of possibilities for that. And I decided, after some deliberation, that the one I liked best out of that was war chest and arches. So now we have war chest as a snake entry and arches crossing it as a crisscross entry, and we have something ending in AWS, which has a lot of possibilities for something that can go there. And my next thought for extending this was to do something that would go there, that would start above AWS, could be any of a number of different consonants, and then bend around and come into person. And it could either end at person or start person going up. Either way, it's going to have one of the overlaps is going to be in reverse, the other one's going to be forward. It'll still have some interesting things going on. So I looked at a few things. I thought about delay, making layperson. Layperson was pretty much the best option that I had for 3 letters coming into person. There were a couple of other possibilities that I found that I didn't like as much, so I said I'll have it be layperson. Delay, a daw is a kind of bird. It's usually called a jackdaw. And even though it's called a jackdaw, the word jackdaw derives from jack and daw. Daw itself is not a common word anymore. So I said, not feeling that. I tried relay, but unless I make this even higher with draws or straws or something, I didn't like having raws as a plural. I can't think of a situation in which raw is a common noun. And I was afraid if I looked it up that I would find things I didn't want to Belay is not going to work because you'll have something ending in LEB, unless it's Celeb or Caleb, but those words seem too short. Because I really wanted to have a second word that is going to take us to over to this O. So the other one that I found that looked promising was melee. Not the word for a fight, but a language spoken in Malaysia and Indonesia and surrounding areas. So I decided to pencil that in. LAM, not a lot of options, but Bedlam is great. And so now we have something that goes B blank blank O. And looked through a few of them. And you could have either something that ends in BED, like cubed, or something that begins with DEB, like debit. And looking through all of those options, I decided that lobed, which is as in, say, the shape of an oak leaf, usually, and bolo was a nice combination. And that pretty much locks down the entire upper right corner now. You know, everything from bolo to stingy and cat and tentacle is set now. We don't need to, we could grow even further up from it, but we would have to grow at least another 2 rows higher to make it really work. And I said, I don't want that. So, and that also tentatively makes me want to close down the rightmost blank column that we haven't used yet, but I'll keep it open in case we need something later. So now we go to the upper left. Yes, we need to have something that comes into MER, like Homer or Timer or something like that. But we also have this man up in the upper left that doesn't have anything coming into it yet. And I said, well, you know, man could be a word on its own, but I also like it being the ending of either some kind of person. You know, we already have person in here, but, you know, something that is the name of an occupation or position, or a surname that ends in man. And so I said, all right, what if we have something that curves around? I'm going to use question marks again. And comes, then turns down after 4 letters, because I want it to come to meet up around where MER is going to end up. And if it's going to go, if the question mark word is going to start going up and then turn to the right, you have the problem where you're going to have this same 4-letter overlap in both words. And it's clearly going, in whatever it meets up with man, it's clearly going to be some kind of morpheme, like mailman or whatnot. And so you run the risk of having it used as the same word effectively in both the snake entry and the Criss-Cross entry, which you really don't want to do. Said, okay, what if it starts going backwards? And this is where you have the issue of, okay, it's going to go to the left and then turn down. What can we do to make that work? And I decided that at some point I needed to make do some dictionary searching. So I said, and I also had some ideas for how to make other words around here work. So I decided to say, okay, let me open up cot. That's one of the other. All right. So I had something like, if I go back to here, I have something where I have 4 letters coming before man. And ordinarily, what I would do is I would say, all right, the length of A is 4 letters. A man. And then, if I've got, I'm going to have some letters after it, maybe call that B. And so what's going to happen is the reversal of A followed by B is going to be a word. Let me blow up cot to make it readable. All right. The reversal of A followed by B is going to be a word. But then if you look at, okay, if these 2 question marks are B, and we also want it to make a word with the beginning of this sequence, that's going to be the first letter in A, and cot doesn't have a way to pull out the first letter of the string that I've called A. So what I need to do instead is say that A is going to be a 3-letter. I'm going to have to use extra variables. B is 1 letter. C is 2 letters, let's say. And so let me just show you how that's going to work here. So I'm calling B is the... so A is the 3 letters that only appear in the horizontal crisscross word leading into man. And I'm going to... I'll have to decide which way to order them first off. But A is the 3 letters that appear there. B is the single letter that appears at the intersection. And C is 2 letters that only appear in the vertical crisscross word over here. And so that's what I've done to start with, saying that A is 3 letters, B is 1 letter, C is 2 letters. I'm going to say that ABC, which is going to be all 3 of those strings together, is a word, which means that A is now starting at the right and going to the left. And then I'm going to have the word that runs into man is going to have to start with B, do the reverse of A, and end in man. B, twiddle A, man. And then the word coming down here, if I say it's going to be just a 3-letter word, then that means that it could be B followed by C. Let's search for that. And so we got a bunch of things, strads, artsman, ads, and so forth. And I sort of focused on the 7-letter word that ends in man to see what I liked. Okay, Brahmin and boar, but not thrilled with that. Looked through. I like Portman. Trophy is not with an H-I as opposed to H-Y is not such a great word, but tropic and pick works. Repo Man is possible with operas or operon, but I don't like RAS as a single 3-letter word, and I don't like operon as a single 6-letter word. Edison and Sideman works. So a few things worked here, but I liked Tropic and Portman and Pick, partly because I could use Portman as a surname rather than a gendered occupation or position. So Tropic and Pick. Give that a color. And so then I said, all right, let's do something similar. And I wanted to fill in the space that is now bounded by Tropic and Macarena and the partial word that is at the start of Meredith. And so I said, what if I have something that bends through these 6 letters? It could maybe extend further by going like this. But I just started out saying, if in particular, if it just goes through these 6 letters, I could have a second word, excuse me, that comes down off of the 3 letters and does something like this. And I preferred that arrangement to going all the way around to the leftmost exclamation mark and going down, because that gives me more freedom to have the 3 letters, and the 3 vertical letters in the exclamation mark word not have to form a word on their own. And this was a case where I said, okay, this could go either forwards or backwards. I'll work on the exclamation marks first. And so, again, you need to isolate each of the letters that is at the intersection of 2 crisscross words needs to be its own variable in this case. That's always going to be the case if you're trying to do this in COT. So I said, all right, let's call them A, B, then around C, D, E, where C is the exclamation mark to the right of it, not the one directly bottom. We're ignoring the question marks for now. And we can do this in either order. We could have A, B, C, D, E, or E, D, C, B, A being the exclamation mark word. So how are we going to express this? So I'll just do another example query here. And I'm going to sort of skip ahead a little bit. Well, no, I won't skip ahead. I'll go here and say, all right. So looking at this, A is 2 letters, B, C, and D are all 1 letter. So A is 2 letters. And a shortcut, if a bunch of different variables are all 1 letter, you can just say that their total length is however many of them there are, because by default, COT assumes that strings that have variable names are at least 1 letter long. You can override that and tell them that they could possibly be 0 letters long, which in some cases is handy. But here, since we know they're 1 letter, we can use that to make this easier. And this time I'm going to say that it goes E, B, C, D, A is a single word, and that's going to be 6 letters. We're going to have a word that starts and ends with C, the letter C, which is going to be a lowercase letter. C, A, B, B, A, C. It's a word. We're going to have a word that goes from B to C to D and possibly continues. So I'll say B, C, D, star. Star means 0 or more letters, although when it's combined with variables, it has some weird ways of interpreting that sometimes. I'm not going to worry about that right now. And then EDMER. Again, I'm going to try to do this in fewer than 20 columns to keep it as in a manageable size. So let's see what we get here. Oh, I just realized it's going to give me some results that don't work because the first word that I gave was in the wrong order. The first word should be EDCBA because I was going in reverse alphabetical order basically. So I'm going to redo that search. And you see a few things. I'm going to focus on the rightmost word because that seems to be how a lot of these are grouped. Lamer, I do not like as a word. Namer, rhymer. Timer is good. And so we have, okay, Tivoli, colic, Ovid, timer. And remember, Ovid, this is the word that has, it has the letters O-V-I and then something after it. And looking at that, I can say that, okay, we not only have Ovid, we could also have ovine, ovipositor, and other words like that. And so we go through, and again, the only word here that I'm liking on the right-hand side is timer, or possibly emmer, which is I think is a kind of wheat, but really, or vomer, which is a kind of bone, but that's a bit technical, I think. So yeah, I'm seeing that Tivoli as in the Tivoli Gardens, etc., works out as giving us both a 5-letter word for timer and also making a word between the two C's that are hanging off of Tropic and Macarena. So I'm going to put that in. And interestingly, as I was writing this, I then went and said, okay, Tivoli's an amusement park in Copenhagen, right? Looked it up. And yes, Tivoli Gardens is an amusement park in Copenhagen, but it turns out that that was inspired by some of the gardens in Tivoli, which is a city in Italy, which sort of made sense because Tivoli did not seem like a very Danish name to me. But that then there was also a Japanese theme park that was inspired by the Danish theme park, and that I think there was yet one more step in there where another country started up a theme park called Tivoli Gardens that was based on the Japanese one. So that is, unfortunately, some of those theme parks are now defunct, so it wouldn't really be a fair question to use in round 2 of Only Connect, but it's an interesting sequence nonetheless. All right. And now we've really closed off the entire top row of this. So I am, in fact, going to shade all of this gray to say, let's not go any higher. All right. And we might be able to say that we can finish up on either side. We might close off both of the left and right columns at some point, or we might want to leave one open to expand. So now I went over to this OVI, and I also have this EN hanging. It's possible. So if we just had Ovid, the Roman poet, probably poet. Sorry, Latinist friends. I don't remember the genres of the various Roman authors. If we had just Ovid there, then we run into a problem where it can't go anywhere again because it can't go down because we've reached the end of the word. And if it goes left or right, you have problems of not lining up with those words. So you need at least 2 letters. And we're also going to have at least 1 letter coming in off of, to come off of EN. And it is possible for these to be in 2 different words. We could have question marks going down here and exclamation marks going this way. But I decided that it was going to be simpler if it was just 1 word. And so I said, well, what if it does something like that? And really it leaves us with ovine as our whatever is coming off of OVI, and we can't go any longer than ovine, really. If we did, we'd again run into a problem where if we go here, well, okay, we have at this intersection of 3 different answers, it's 2 of the directions it can only go for 1 letter, and so to be long enough, you're gonna run into a problem where letters don't have any place, where the words don't have anywhere to go again. So you can't go longer than 5 letters from OVI. So we'll just put in ovine, and then that means that we have something over here that connects E and keeps going. And there are a couple of possibilities here. It could just be that we have a single letter that this Criss-Cross word here is just E blank EN, which would probably be Eden or even, or it could have a single letter to the left of it. So let's first take a look at, this is just going to be a plain old dictionary search. So I'm going to say it could be 4 or 5 letters, because we don't know how many letters are going at the beginning. E.en, and this will give me everything that is 4 or 5 letters and ends in E blank EN. Okay, for 4 letters, the good words are Eden and even. For 5 letters, the reasonable words are Helen, Seven, and Yemen. So, and I did try a couple of them, you know, like Helen and Yemen, and then I decided what I really liked was if I put VEN in here, if I put this as a V, I have the option to leave the letter to the left of even blank or put an S into it later. Options are good, so let's keep this here. So now I'm going to say, all right, A is 2, A-V-E-N, V, twiddle A. You know, we could do some more constrained searching, but I wound up looking through things that ended with VEN, and Cloven looked nice, so I put Cloven in, and I have Volk, which part of why I was originally reluctant to do that because I thought that I had volcanoes up here, and remember that I took it out because it wasn't a word or wasn't properly spelled and replaced it with Thanos. So now I have Cloven here, but I can put something else really about volcanoes here. So A and so forth. Cloven is going to be a full snake then. And so you could have volcano, you could have volcanic, you could have other words that relate to volcanoes. But I am a little bit nervous about now the Criss-Cross word that ends in K-E-S. We're not going to have a single letter, even though you could have, say, eeks there. Again, you're going to run into a position where the word will run out of space to move. If it has at least 2 letters, it's going to run into the A. So no matter what, it's going to have the A and the K-E-S. So star A dot K-E-S. We have awakes and tea cakes, and then words that are going to be longer than we have space for. And tea cakes was a possibility. But I decided to go with awakes. I was torn on that at first because I'm more used to it being an adjective than a verb. But I found enough citations for things like, you know, the dreamer awakes or the giant awakes and things like that, as opposed to awaken, which is what I'm more used to using as a verb when it's that sort of construction. But awakes had enough citations that I felt comfortable using it. And also we were going to have something like AN, and at this point I said, this isn't a great letter combination over here for this snake, but I can think of Okinawa as something that will work here, and I is a letter that can come over here with volcanic, because we can have volcanic something. And Okinawa can go like that. Okinawa, can't remember whether it is an island or a city in Japan, but it is definitely a place in Japan. And so we're going to have at least, we're going to have something coming down off of Volcana. And it also looks like we might have something, you know, IKON, that can be a variant spelling of icon. I'm not thrilled with that. So what else could we have here that has IKON in it? If we had Nikon, the camera brand, and we also have something like volcanic here, again, we're going to run into a problem where this N has nowhere to go. But daikon, D-A-I-O-K-O-N, is a kind of vegetable, Japanese radish, that works nicely there. and also gives us room for a snake to turn, but still within the 19 columns that we have been working with. So I then said, I'd like to use some of the space up here, maybe even going as far as the S that would turn even into 7. If this entry turned upwards at some point, how can I make that happen? And what the best thing that I found for that was I couldn't get it to go all the way to the S, but I was able to find a doors, giving us EROD, which could be some form of erode, eroding, eroded, and ESC, which I like to minimize my use of abbreviations, but since it is literally the letters on a commonly used keyboard key, I'll take it. And I had the C in here just as an illustration of that there has to be a letter here, but it doesn't have to be a C, actually. You could have volcanism as well. So at this point, what did I do next? I said, all right, so I looked at some possibilities for continuing around here. I said, all right, KANS, I'm gonna need at minimum Kansas. That takes us up to 16 rows. If I want to keep it at 20 or fewer, about the only thing that I could do to extend Kansas is I could possibly make it Kansas City, which would take us to 20 rows, and I'd be at my stated limit. But we definitely need Kansas, and so it's probably either Kansas or Kansas City. If we just had volcanic here, again, we'd run out of space for the C to go, so it would have to be something that is longer. It could be volcanically, which, as opposed to volcanic ally, which some of my friends once tried to call in for an answer in a baffle hunt before realizing that it could be construed as a single word. So you could have volcanic ally. You could have some things that are volcanic, like volcanic ash, or volcanic rock. And some of these had some great options, but I was worried about how they would work with what's coming in from the left, because if you have, say, volcanic rock, you have this great CROCK. That's already part of a word. It could be crockpot, what have you. But on this side, we have EROD. That can only get extended so far. It has to be longer than just erode. It could be erodes or eroded, but then it's going to have to turn. It could be eroding or erodent. I don't like erodent because I don't remember what it means. I think it's something to do with teeth. But in any of these cases, that word is going to have to turn and then join up with whatever is coming off of volcanic. So I had a couple of possibilities through there that I was willing to consider. I had something like eroded and crude. And I said, okay, so we've got to have volcanic rock down here. DUR is not a word in itself, so it's got to go further to the right. I couldn't think of, and it's got to go at least to the A, so it forces us into going dura mater. And now we have the OCK, which either is the beginning of a word, which doesn't have many options, or it's the end of the word, which makes it basically EKCO, which I can never remember which is the fashion company and which is the housewares company, but EKCO. And I didn't like any of that, and it was giving me problems, so I said, okay, let's not try to do volcanic rock. Volcanic ash didn't have anything that would meet up with eroded or erodes. But eventually I decided that if the volcanic word ends right after just 2 letters, then we can do some things. Now, it's not going to all be the same word here, but what's going to happen is that we're going to have a couple of different words meeting up here. So we have something like that, and then and something in a different color over here. That we could possibly have, something that goes from A to MS, and something else that goes along here and makes words in both, and can make something here in the blue and yellow going across that could be a longer word. And I did, again, some searches for that, and there were 2 possibilities that I liked, and this is basically the point where I got in the puzzle and said, okay, I'm gonna go that far and then see what I do from there. So I have 2 possibilities that I liked here. So one of them was to have demo tape going across, which gives me atoms coming into the MS, and then we're going to have an E here, and whatever is over in the blue, in the cyan, is going to have to either begin or end with EDE. That is not the best start or end, but it's not the worst start or end either. So that's a possibility, and it's probably going to have fewer possibilities than the other one. So I want to try that first, partly because I like demo tape as an answer. The other possibility is that we have something that goes that starts with SIMULA, which could be simulate, simulation, simulacra. And then the yellow word is now alums, which is either the aluminum compounds or a alternative to alumni or alumnae. And partly because I like demo tape better, and partly because I like atoms better, I'm gonna see if we have something that works for that first. Now, in both of those cases, we're gonna have to be careful with Kansas as well, because we now have demo tape or simulacrum or simulate or whatever. We again have the problem that this S that has to go into Kansas has to extend in, basically can only go down. So we have to make Kansas longer, and the only thing that I found was Kansas City. And then we could have something where maybe something begins with SC or ends in ICS over here. We'll work that out when we get to it. And even if we change demo tape to simulate, we're still going to have the issue of having to extend Kansas down to city. But first I want to see what options we have for an entry in cyan that can begin or end with EDE. And I'm just going to see just how many words there are and not yet worry about whether they can then make a word starting with the E and going down into the exclamation marks. So first, EDE, start. All right, Eden is too short. Edema, possible, but I'm not a fan. Edentate, again, seems like a technical term that I don't want to have too much of. Edelweiss is nice, but I don't think the letter combinations are going to work. So let me just take a look. You know, if I had those, I would have edema, EMA, which has some possibilities like email. If I did edentate, you know, ENT is a good start, and then I can go either direction. I can go in various directions with the ATE. So it has possibilities, but I'm not liking it as an entry on its own. Edelweiss is not going to work because we'll have this ELW, and yeah, we could do, make it turn somewhere and have like Elwes, Carrie Elwes, or Elway, John Elway, down here, but then the end of Edelweiss is going to not have anywhere to go, and so that won't really work. So could maybe use edema, but not happy about it. If it ends in Eid, again, want it to be at least 5 letters. So for 5 letters, we have Swade or Swede. For 6 letters, impede, recede, secede, and if you get longer than that, I don't want to go much longer than that because we're sort of getting cramped in that corner. But you see that we have some options, but again, they're not really great. If we had, Swede is not going to work, EWS. Swade, EUS, probably has some possibilities, but they're probably going to be longer and run off the edge of the grid, because now we're at 20 rows with Kansas City, and so we can't go any further than that. So what begins with EUS? I know Eustace and Eustachian tubes, Euston, Eustace, Eusebian. Anything that looks remotely usable is probably going to be too long and won't really fit in the space we have. It's a shame that we can't quite make the C's line up over here, because we could do Eustace, but then staccato is possible, but then where does the E go in Eustace? It's going to turn, and we're going to have a problem there. So not Swade. If we go back to the other 6 and 7 letter words, it was like impede, recede. I don't think those are going to give us good starting letters in here, because we would have impede, we'd have EPM, recede would give us ECE. Those are not going to be the good starts of words. So sadly, I don't think demo tape is going to work unless there's a phrase that's begins with Eden or something like that isn't really in cot. And so I'll pull up New Traumatic and just see what it gives me for EDE A star. So it gives us Eden, edema, Edelman, which would give us Elm. We already have a surname that ends in man, so I wouldn't want to sign off on it immediately. Edens, you can have, I guess you can pluralize it. Edelweiss, Eden Park, Edenton. Edelman. Oh, Ed and Eddie. I don't. I don't know what Edessa with an E instead of an O is, but I'm not happy with it. Yeah, at that point, I could see what begins with Ed and then has a surname that starts with E. Again, Ed and Eddie, Ed Emery, Ed Edwards. These are not jumping out at me as being good names, and we'll also have the problem that whatever that surname is will be repeated. So if I go for Edelman, the name is familiar, but I can't recall why. Maybe is he the Julian? Okay, Julian Edelman is a football wide receiver. I've never heard of him before, and I live in Boston, but I don't really follow football, so that doesn't mean much. Edelman is a public. Oh, I think I was thinking of Edelman with an A, who is the A in the RSA encryption algorithm, maybe? Rick Edelman. I'm sort of going down a rabbit hole here that isn't even helpful, but let me... RSA crypto system... Oh, Edelman. Oh, it's spelled with an A and with the LE reversed, so I was just so far from being right there. So EDE is not going to work. That's sad. So I will put in simulate, and this is going to be some stuff. It could be simulate, it could be simulacra. We don't know. We don't know what this what's coming off of the ISE, but here it's going to have to end in ISE, because I don't think you're going to find much beginning with ESI. But ISE is a more common ending trigram than EDE, I'm pretty sure. And in fact, I can think right off of one particularly nice word that ends in ISE that is tempting, but I don't think will actually work. I mean, we can have IoT that becomes IOTAs, but then we'd have to turn and go OROT. I don't think there's anything that goes TROTC. That's not how Trotsky is spelled. It's going to be trot, canter. Those are just different kinds of horse gaits. Trot Creek and Trot Church are probably not actually notable. And if we put a single letter before it, it's not going to help. At Rotsy. No. All right, so not going to be tortoise, sadly. I'm probably spending too much time trying to justify justify a self-insert here, but what if it turned here? Oh no, then if it turned there, you couldn't have iota there, so no, it's not going to be tortoise at all. But it could still be something ending in ISE. It could be something simple like arise or anise that gives you IRA or INA. And I think that has enough possibilities. So I'm going to shift over to the end of Kansas City now. And we've got, so I thought either we have something that begins in SC and then turns. There's not a lot with SCI, but maybe SSORS. What if... Okay, just sort of spitballing here. So, scissor. And something that comes off of scissor. Now, ROSSI can be Rossini. There. Composer. We have this issue where whatever is coming off of IS then has to play nicely with the R coming off of scissor. But that might be possible. And we might have, it might be scissors or something, in which case it would have to go down. It could be scissors, or it could be scissored. Something like that. Or it could just be scissor if you're using it as a verb. So, how is that going to work? So, just seeing if scissor is feasible. So, putting that in. So, basically, we're going to have, we know we have ISE in this word, and the two letters have to then be reversed and do something with the IR. So A is 2 letters, A-I-S-E, I, twiddle A, R, star. Oops, that should be a capital A. All right. Normally it doesn't take this long for a search of this complexity. Here we go. All right, so we have anise and a bunch of in-arm, in-arc, in-arms in a row, and then it starts getting too long. Going back here, I mean, we could have in a row, we then have OW coming off of scissor, which is not great. So this maybe get torn up, but in a row. And then we have to turn this OW around so that it comes over to the Y. And we're probably going to want it to just be the 5 letters. I can't go past the O because then we won't have a long enough word. I can't turn at the O. But if that were to happen, so you'd have OW 5 letters. I don't think you're going to have anything 5 letters ending in WO. Nope. But we could have Owens or Owing. Owens, Owing. And we need it to have a vowel after the W. So we could have Owens or Owing, but then we have the Y. And I don't think either of those, wingy or Wednesday, I don't think either of those is going to make, excuse me, a word. Wednesday, no. Wingy, just wingy, and it can't be just wingy because it's going to have to start with TY and go further. So scissor, while I really liked that as an idea, would not actually work. So let's, all right, we gotta get rid of that. Gonna make this unshaded again. Put SCI back and get rid of the letters that I was guessing at down there. All right. So one thing that a dividing point that I wanted to have for the snakes in this area is, unless it's going to start with SC, if it's going to go upwards, there are some words that end in CS, and almost all of them end with ICS. So that would be a nice place to break between one word and the other, which means it would be like that. And I liked the idea of having something with the TY that maybe came out like Tyler and rely or style or something like that, that's going to go over in this direction. And then if we have something on the right, it could be something like topics or whatever that comes up with something. And one of the things that I like about a word like rely in particular, or Tyler in particular, is that rely cannot just be a word by itself, but you could put barely or merely or something else before it. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility there. All right, so what if I start with Tyler? And this is sometimes when you get into the corners, you wind up having to use a lot of shorter snakes, 5 and 6 letters. That's kind of At some point, that's going to be unavoidable, probably. You just don't want to have 5 and 6 letter snakes all over the place, especially in an area that is wide open, like currently the lower right hand of the grid. So we'll have to keep that in mind as we get further along. And I'm now looking at rely, which could be merely or barely, and there are various things you could do, like usage to make surely, which gives us a GE going towards maybe something that comes off of if we want to have the ICS word come from the left, we could have something where they meet around there. So I'm actually gonna take some of these out and think about how I'm going to make these join together. Yeah, if something is coming off of really, it's gonna be at least really. All right, coming back down here. So it's got to be, first it's got to turn like that, and then in order to be 5 letters, it's got to either go up, which will force words to go in one way, or it can go to the right. Now, I am seeing a sort of confluence of things that might work if we do something where the cyan shifts to the right to get us a 3-letter word in that particular crisscross position. And then either the X word goes to the left one, or the cyan word, the orange word goes one left, or the cyan word goes one right, and then the orange word goes down. And I think, just in terms of how many letters we have, I'll try doing it like this. And I wanted to, at least as a starting stab at it, try maybe topics here and have something that begins with opine, opinion, opium, opiate. And then a 7-letter word that ends in ISE. And now we have a bunch of words for that, but we're going to want it to begin with at least a consonant so that it can make a word with OTE. So put in a consonant. Cognize, concise, honest. Despise might work. Heloise, no. Malaise might work. Mortis might work. Reprise might work. So if we put something in here, well, the first one was DES, despise. No, that's not going to work because we have IPS there. Malaise gives us IAL, unfortunately. What were the other words I had? Mortis is going to give us ITR, and the other one was reprise. It's not going to work. Premise, precise. Oh, pote isn't a word. Oh, but yeah. Um, so one thing, so yeah, we have, all right, so topics doesn't have to be topics though. So we can't have malaise, but if we have a 7-letter word that ends in I-S-E, and we want those 3 letters to be a word. So going through here again, not Heloise, not low-rise, not malaise, not mortis, could be precise with ice going backwards. And that's pretty much it there. So maybe, you know, backing off of topics, well, P-R-E, ice. So what we would have over here is something that ends in ERP. And I'm not a fan of derp. But we could have perp or terp, terp being the University of Maryland Terrapins. So that is going to have, I think T might be better for turning the curve, but who knows. So we have T or P here. And then we're going to have, well, what can we have that ends in R-E-L-Y? Did I overlook anything before? Barely, direly, merely, purely. Okay, there's a few good things there. Oh, rarely probably has something good there. Surely, rarely. All right. So now, yeah, so I've got, let's try T first. Oh, well, actually, it could be T or P, right? I forgot. T or P. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the 2 letters down here, both A, and the 2 letters here, B. So, A is 2 letters. B is 2 letters. Oh, right. I need to... No. I'm going to need to make this... Sorry. Because I need to separate out the letter that's at the intersection. I actually need to do AB is 2 letters. C is 2 letters. ABC, and then either T or P. Oh, I'm seeing where that's going to be a problem. T or P, and then C backwards, and then A, and then BA, barely. So we'll see what we get that way. Now, one problem I realize is that T, if we have T going one direction and P going the other direction, it will be a problem. And in fact, all we get is abort, prob, and barely. I'm a little surprised at that. But we can then turn it around so that instead of going TP, ABC, we go TP, CBA. And I know this will have some possibilities. I just want to find one that I like. Plume and plum, prime and prim. Okay, so of those, I think plume and plum have a sound more different than prime and prim. So I would put in, unless I wanted to use, what were the ones that had T in it? Theme and them. Theme and them is also good. I feel like I use a lot of things that use THE a lot, though, because it will come up as either the article in a title or part of a pronoun like them. And so I think I'm going to use plume and merely, because that seems a little bit more novel there. And then and then I can fill in the orange one, and we just have to have 2 letters at the beginning that can make something with P blank blank E, and then presumably we extend whatever is going to the right. So dot dot NICS. Conics, cynics, dinics, panics, sonics, tonics, tunics. Darn it. Oh, right. It doesn't have to be an N. Okay, that should give me more. Basics, civics, comics, dinics, ethics, logics. I don't really like that as in the plural. Magics, medics, mimics, musics, optics, panics, relics, sonics, stoics, tonics, topics, tunics, right. Huh, that was not as good as I was hoping. Do I have any other do I have anything that can go just SCI dot in 3 letters? Maybe, maybe not. Scient, Scylla, Scions, Scipio, Siroc. None of those are going to do what I want them to do the other way. So I think the only thing that works there is sonics, but I already have supersonic in the grid, or logics, which I don't like as an answer in the plural. So I might have to back out of that. So one thing that I can do here is move where where the cyan and orange intersect, get rid of precise, get rid of plume, change some of this shading, change both of these to white, and then change these to orange. And we still have something that can end in R, which is down here in the rely, which is fine. So let's see, what do we have for 3 letters ending in ISE? And again, we want the letters before the I to make something going down. So I'm going to look at that. Could be cerise, which could be ire. I suppose you could have devise or revise and have it be the contraction I've, which may be actually preferable here. So yeah, I think that's going to be better than cerise. So we have D or R. Lots of I think there's going to be more possibilities for the yellow word, whatever we pick for the D or R. So if we then want something to come over to the ICS, it's got to be 7 letters ending in ICS. And the problem that we're going to have here is that for it to start with D or R and end with R, we need at least 1 vowel between them, possibly 2. Probably 2. So going back here, I don't think any of this is going to work either. Unless, nope. Yes, none of those work. So sadly, my grand plans have been thwarted by the cruel, cruel English language. I might be advised to give up at this point, or I might continue foolishly. There's also a possibility if I turn the green letters to cyan, and then we have either are there any good 5-letter words ending in ICS? Epics, and that's about it. Now, there's more than one way to break these words to break these words up, and I might have to try a different arrangement. Instead of going up in the yellow, I could have gone to the right, and then let me see what that would give me in just a second. Sort of. All right. So I'll unshade those, unshade this one, and this is, you know, I was hoping that I would be able to finish the grid soon, but that's obviously not going to happen. So we could do something like this arrangement, which has potential. It does mean that we have to have, I'm going to say that we're going to have a rise coming off of the cyan. Anise would potentially work, but it would leave us with INA, which I think needs at least 2 letters to be completed. So presumably we're going to have a an N at the end of IRA, because a Q is not going to work in that position. Again, if we have this time I'm just going to give them all different variable names, which I'm going to have to do anyway. So A, B, C, D equals 4, and A, B, C, D. Then we have, I'm not gonna worry about A-N yet, so I'll say ABC is a word, and C-D-R-E-L-Y. Come on. Naira, air, and rarely. What is Naira? Naira is the currency of Nigeria. Is that the? It is the main currency. That's possible. I didn't know that. So if we did this backwards, well, I see one word that I'm not going to want to use. Do it backwards. Yeah. So I might use Naira. Let me see if there's another way these can come together. What are the 6-letter words ending in ICS? Civics. Or panics. Panics or relics. Okay, there's enough there that I might be able to do something with that. So what if yellow, orange, I am sort of straining the searches to their limit, really. A, B, C, D, E. Make that 5 letters. None of those are going to work going the other way, but if I do it DCB, but if I reverse it, it gives me upland, upland, yeah, Alp. All right, let's try that. Sorry, just stopping to admire my handiwork. All right, so if I have upland, then I would need to have one of the words that ends in IC. Well, AND dot dot I star. Right? Android, andesine, andesite. Why does it have andouillette and not andouille? I don't think... Yeah, SE is not going to work. But let me go over to... Going to go over to Nutramatic. Start off with it being a... Do I have an extra? Oh. That's uppercase when it shouldn't have been. Android, Andre, andesite, andoni, Andorian. I don't know what that means. Andolic. All right, well, those aren't going to work. And if we just made it... no. I'm sort of going through different geometric arrangements in my head here, trying to make this left-hand corner work. All right, let's try... Nautics or rustics, that's not going to work. So if we did go back to Naira, and I used the Nigerian currency, which I'm okay with, you know, as long as it's the principal currency unit and not a subdivision, I'm okay with most national currencies, and Nigeria is certainly a large enough country that its national currency should be usable. Right. So what if I have something that goes, oh, tonics, and then something that comes like Antonio or Antonia or something like that, Antonin. It's gonna have to be more than just the O, or it's gonna have to be more than 7 letters. That's fine. I'll go over here. Antonai, A star. No, it needs to be at least 2 letters, so I'll do that. Antonio de, no. Antonina, maybe. Antonin Scalia, the NS isn't going to work. Antonio Maria. Antonioni or Antonio Banderas are both good. So yeah, I'll do Antonio, probably Antonioni. Antonio Banderas is just going to give me too many letters as a liability. So that took a while, but we're now out of the lower left corner. We'll have to do some similar things in the lower right-hand corner when we get there. But for now, we are back into the open center of the grid. And I can have more freedom in placing things, which is good. So if we do All right, so as I said, we could do simulate, we could do simulation. Simulation is not good because it forces us to either start with TIO or end with OIT, and we could have Benoit, the first name of, say, Mandelbrot. But I think we have better options with simulate, simulates, simulated, simulator, or simulacra or simulacrum. I know, is there any particular, I mean, other than the concept itself of, is there anything in particular that has that as a name? Simulacrum, you know, it's a, so it's a representation of a thing. Excuse me, it's a treatise by Baudrillard. Simulacra. It's a game. Is it a well-known game? It's got a score of 10 out of 10. I'm not sure that makes it notable. So Simulacra game. Yeah, it actually might be. Although I don't see. Yeah, I have no idea if it's a reasonable game. But either way, it doesn't mean I can't use it. I think simulacrum might be a little bit more difficult because we'd probably get into having to do something like crummy or yeah. And so what if we did and let's, you know what, a simulator is probably going to be easier anyways. It has easier letters. It's more familiar. So we'll go with simulate, simulator. Maybe simulates and have it be something that ends in set. And so I'm going to start by assuming that both TOR or TE, whatever, that's the start of one word, and ONI, or the end of a word, and that O and I is all one word. These might turn around to intersect each other. Excuse me. So let's see. If I want things to go backwards, again, I could have something that ends in Eno. I don't want it to be too similar to Al Pacino, though. And heck, with Al Pacino and Antonioni, we now have at least 2 Italian names in the grid. And so having a third Italian name that crosses Antonioni would be a little bit start to feel repetitive. But there are other things that we could have in here, like, you know, what else ends in INO? I mean, some of them are going to be maybe Spanish instead of Italian. Chino, Rhino, Domino, things like Maraschino, which is Italian, but is at least, you know, more of a thing rather than a name. Neutrino, San Bernardino. A lot of these are going to run into problems if they're too long to see what we do when they get turned around. But I might at least take a look at how some of those work in here. Go back here. Okay. All right, so it looks like it'll be better if it has 2 vowels there. So, or, yeah. Could be something like domino, Not cappuccino. Domino or casino. It's just, I mean, a casino would go like that, and then we could have simulator turning up and giving us something different. I mean, the other option is to have something that starts with ONI, which could be something about onions. So let's look at that. Lots of things about onions. The problem with something beginning with onion is that after the N, it's going to be a different, it's probably not. So if we did onion going down to the bottom, and then we turned, if we do something like onion rings, then we have NRI, not a good beginning. So one possible solution is to instead turn here and maybe do something like onion dome. Actually, if I do that, then I can do tarot coming up here, and we have a nice ratio. Look how that worked. I didn't even have to look anything up for that one, really. Again, I've got a bunch of 5- and 6-letter words in that, in the lower left, and so I want to have some longer ones. Onion dome is good. Oh, okay. Mod is fine as a word on its own, and I'm going to want to have something like on demand over here. So then that gives us something like, this potentially gives us, ooh, I'm going to have to be careful about how these come together in order to make sure that the words are long enough. So what I'm going to, I was thinking of having something that ended with name. There's not a lot that ends with D name, I don't think, other than dead name, which is not something that I want to promote in a crossword either. D name, brand name, household name, maybe brand name. Yeah, especially if I turn so that it's not brand over here. So let's go R-A-N-D, and maybe put the B this way. It might turn instead. All right, so we'll make that, I don't know, green. All right, and also make this green. All right, so now thinking that I want to have something coming off of tentacle to bring us to the BR, and it should end in a vowel. So we have a 7-letter word starting with CLE, C-L-E, and ending with a vowel. Cleanse? I think I can make cleanse work, probably. And probably have something continuing on both sides of that word. Let's see, Rand, I probably want to have Randy here as a name, although I could have R&R, or, yeah, I'll leave that open. So I'm going to have something with BRE in it, fine. Let's see, if I have, I think it's probably going to turn out that AN goes into one snake and SE goes into another snake. There are certainly things that have ANSE in them. Let me see if we have much that has ESNA in them. Not a lot. Tree snake, but I already have snakes. Rattlesnake, Same thing. Purse snatching, nah. And if we have like Hansel. We already have, no, that's not Kansas. That's a different word. Swansea, Sancerre. No, I don't like the one S spelling of sans there. Expanse. I could do expanse. Transept. So there are some options there for something that has ANSE. If we did one of those, like if it were Hansel, then we'd have an L coming off of there. If we had expanse, then you have the problem that we have EXP here, and you're going to have another expat word. Expats might work, but you're using the same prefix. Let's see if there's anything else here. Transept is going to give us some letters that don't work well with the BRE. Merganser is a kind of duck. Pansexual will probably not work out well there. Tasman Sea, maybe? Let's see, transize. Let me go back and see if there's something that I could turn the other way. Oh, transect, but that still gives me the problem of the whatever comes after. Manservant, Merganser. This might not work as well as I thought. Dans Macabre. Oh, that... No, that's not going to work the way I was hoping, because we have Macabre, we have BRE over here. Let's see. Hansel, Brel. If it were Merganser, nope. Hanseatic League, Tasman Sea. Caspian Sea, nope. What if, just as a, we have maybe, oh, that, if it was the name of a sea, we don't have many options for that. Caribbean Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Caspian Sea, Arabian Sea, Aegean Sea, Tasman Sea. Although, actually, yeah, I'll try T-A-S-M. No. Could work. Or I could turn and do SATB, but that's, I don't think I like, although SATB is very commonly used in choral scores, 9 million. That's a lot. Okay, I'll try that. Put this in orange. And let's see, that can be either break or bread. And I think I'm going to want to have a couple of different things going on here, one of which goes maybe, excuse me, ooh. Okay, that I actually see something that works very well for that right off. Dwell gives us small and lewd. See, sometimes it's better. Sometimes if you can figure out the words without looking them up, then it goes a lot faster. Big surprise there. Now, it might be possible to have lewdness coming down. And so we'd have 3 letters and then SSEN. Knussen, Meissen, Glassen, none of those are going to work in this case. Let me just see if there's anything else. Lewd, ... Actually, in addition to dwell, there's also droll, which gives me something else for that, which, see, so Lord, L-O-R-D, ... Most of these are not things that I want, but maybe there's the name of a lord. Lord, Lord High, Lord Hal, Lord John, Lord Rama, Lord Grey, but that's usually Earl Grey. Lord King. Yeah, lordship would be the best thing there. Now, it could be that we have something else, and both small and bread or break get extended further. I'm about to sneeze. Apologies for the noise. Or I might not sneeze. Oh, one thing that I forgot is that the TEM that I have off of Onion Dome needs to be extended before it makes a word. And now that I have other things in place, it looks like I'm going to need to, well, it could be just temp. But if I do anything past bread or break, anything to the left of that, star BREA dot, yeah, it does mean that I can't put anything before BREA. All right, that's fine. So we could have temp, we could have tempo, temper. Oh, there's also bream, but I would prefer bread or break. Oops, that's not the right length. Null or krill, plonk. No, not good words. But it also could be something that ends in SMA, like classmate. Duvet. All right. I'm going to go with tempo or tempe so that it can start at the P and then turn up. And maybe make this magenta and then turn up. And it could be Tempe, Arizona. At least go up that much. And then turn. It'd be nice if I could get it to meet up with SMA. All right, so if I do we have basmati, desmans, outs. Oh, right. It's going to be UT, messmate, classmate, fool's mate. Bridesmaid, will that? BRI. Okay, let's do A equals 2. No, AB equals 2. Got 3 letters there. C equals 3. P, O-E. D equals OE. That's the way to do it. Give itself a variable, but nail it down. P, OE. PD, channel C, dot, and turn it B, go down C to D. See if we get anything for all of these. If we do, I'll be very happy. No! Womp womp. Well. And so we would have to do that backwards. A, B, twiddle, C, D, P. Backwards might work. OP isn't a bad ending. But no. Alright, so that's not going to work. Alright, in that case, I will go back and maybe not go all the way up to the SMA, and instead just go to here. So SMA, there's small, there's smart. Smart's not going to be good for turning around, though. Smack doesn't work. Smarm, smart, smash could work because we can start with SH. Okay, so if it's smash, so we would have SH All right. Okay. So could be shock or shark or shard. And actually, what if? Excuse me. What if we went a little bit further and did something like this, and then the middle letter is either yellow or cyan. So this is interesting because now we have two different snake words that are having a lot of different combinations. So I'll just label it A, B, B, C, D, E. Actually, no. D, E, F, G, G, and then S and H are already set. All right, so our two words. Oh, well, first I'll do the crisscross words. So we're going to have, all right, the ones that are one letter are going to be A, C, and F. So we'll say A, C, F is 3 letters. B must be 2 letters, G must be 2 letters, and D and E together are 3 letters. Then H, G, G, F, E, D, C is a word. F, D, E, C. A, B, C. Let's see. Then we're going to have B-R-E-A-F. Oops, I don't need, not wrong window. B-R-E-A-F. S-H-G-F-E. And actually, I'm going to say that D and E can both be possibly 0 letters. So scroll over S-H-G-F-E. Then D-C Twiddleby. And I'm actually not going to specify that R-A-N-D plus A is a word, because I think there are going to be some things that I'm willing to use that are not in here, like R and R, R and B. Okay, so we have some things that are clearly split into words, like hard back, hard case. And that's not going to work as well because we have the same words going both in the same direction. Hardship, hard tops. Wait, is that the right length? Yes, it is. Okay, hard sale. Let's see. I think I accidentally did my words in the wrong order somewhere. Aha, here we go. Should be EDC. Sorry about that. That I put where I had the two things that could be variable lengths, they were in the wrong order. So this should work better now. Handyman. Well, I already have one man and man. Well, I like a lot of handyman, yarn, bread, shandy, and man ray, which would also give us randy down at the bottom. But that might be too many man words, maybe. But let's see what else we got in here. Huckster. that's too short. So if we go, what's that? Oh, yeah. And actually D has, all right. So I'm trying to remember how Man Ray got his name, because I don't think that was his given name. Manuel Radnitsky. Huh. I mean, I think I'd rather do something else if I can. Huckster, Shuck, Steroid, Dior. That's nice. And if I go here, A, B, C, twiddle D, let's see what I get. Oh wait, Dior wouldn't work. All right. Hook nose. I'm not sure I like that. Well, I don't know that I like hooked nose. Oh, an Aqualine. Okay. Yeah, Aqualine. All right, sure. How many? Well, although it doesn't have that many hits, and it is often used as a stereotype. So no, not going to go with hook nose. Anything else working in here? Skull. No. Boast. Well, those are getting to be too short. R and R. East, Rice, Roost. Rans. Scare. Ooh, excuse me. Maybe go back to the previous search and see what it turned up. Hardship, Shipway. I mean, I could do something like Handyman and, oh no, not Maniac, because that's not a good letter that works there. R and so if it is just that many letters, then we have guitars, maybe. That's all we have for. Okay. And I don't think this will work if I reverse this word. No, not that word. This one is going to be twiddle E, F, twiddle G, H, S. There's not going to be a lot of stuff that ends in HS there, but we can see. Basically just omras and whatnot. All right, so in that case, I will go ahead. Just make sure I don't have any of that elsewhere, because sometimes So I do have the man that I'm not excited about. Handyman and Man Ray. Looks nice. This might be an area of the grid that I just hold on to for now and come back to later. Also, oh, well, actually, if I did have L instead, if I had small instead of smash, do that. Right, that's not going to work with that. Droll, drill, bedroll, inkwell. Actually, okay, I'll. This might be a situation where rather than having this one long word that goes down all the way through handyman, it might be better if I just went back and did small, lewd, get rid of that, and then get rid of these letters and just have something that doesn't go up to lewd, but instead hits the A. I do prefer to have one longer word over two shorter words of the same length in a grid like this, but sometimes you just have to take what you can get. All right. Okay, and what am I going to do with... So I have a couple of things that I need to work out before I can finish this grid. So I need to finish the lower right-hand corner, which is going to be... all right, so again, give them letters A, B, C, get back here, C, and then D is 3 letters. A, B, C is 3 letters. D is 3 letters. Lowercase a, D, C, A, B, C, and let's first say A, B, C backwards D. Let's see what we get from that. I think this will have a lot. All right, so I'm actually gonna try it the other way around first to see what kind of I think the overlaps will be a little bit less what's the word I'm looking for? Blatant, and I also need to spell that correctly. So one problem here is that you have a lot of things like that start with A and then have something like, I don't know, A bomb and then bombed, which will have the bomb in them. So seeing what else we have. I think I will just look through the 6-letter words first and see what I like. Excuse me. Warden. These aren't as good as I was hoping. Sheriff, Scotia. Could have rent and rental. Oh, what's the letter that I have to have? A has to be. A has to go with rand, so I'll tell it what it has to be. It can be R and B. Randa. Her. Oh, R and R. It's probably a lot of these have R, aren't, and renter, but ret isn't a good word. Amend and mender. Oh, but that's mend used the same way. Akron and kroner. But I already have one currency. Best not to go too heavy on that. Acorn and corner and ren. So I could do acorn, corner, and ren, or I could do it the other way, A, B, C, twiddledee. Neil's nice. Maybe Aesop, rep, and repose. Satrap. So I think I'll go with acorn and corner and those things. Although, going back to that previous one that had, do I have stuff that doesn't, although R and R is a good phrase, it's usually with an ampersand, so I guess I'd prefer an S or a Y. S has Akron and Kronos. Is that how you spell Zeus's father, with a K or a C? Cronus is usually spelled with that way. Yeah, oh, yes, the Kronos Quartet. Why didn't I think of that? I'm a bad musician. Okay, so yes, I will go with Akron, Sun, and Kronos in here. Akron being the Ohio City, Kronos being the string quartet. All right. And okay, that is again 2 currencies now. Is there anything here that gives us a Y? Massey or yep. No, those are not good words. All right. So we still need to come around and see what. So there are a couple of things that need to be filled in. We have the magenta word that either begins or ends with PO or OP. And I think we want something more in this wide area here. One possibility is that there are some things that you can put before ratio. You could have something like PE ratio for the financial term, or you could have Horatio for the name, character. I'll start with Horatio. If we have Horatio, we could either have O whatever, or we could have something ending in HO, and it looks like we're going to want it to go to the right. And H is going to be wanted to be followed by a vowel. So that's going to make some things tricky here, because if we go OH vowel ... there's probably not a lot. Ojones, I have no idea what that is. ... vowel HO, Navajo, yo-ho-ho. And I don't think either of those are going to work with what I want, but if I go OH vowel AAA in New Dramatic, it might give me some Ohio in Ohio. O Henry, nope. O'Hara's, oh, you might have something with O'Hare. Although O'Hare's, but if I do that, how's it going to have to? So let me just see what we get. I think this is just going to have Horatio probably, or maybe one of the, I didn't want to make a new window, but here we are. Horatio, and then some longer things like gear ratio, cross ratio. If we have, it'll give me Horatio, PE ratio. If I give it 3 letters, which is probably not going to work. Excuse me. Nope. All right, so Horatio. What is the PE ratio? How often is that used, and is there a particular way that it's 7 million? I'm going to see if I put in definition, it might show up in like a dictionary or a Wikipedia or something. Wiktionary. Okay, price earnings rating. What does Wikipedia say about price earnings? No, I don't want a video. No, get out of here. All right. Price earnings ratio. And I'm perfectly fine with using PE ratio with a hyphen. No, not a hyphen, a slash. Definition. Yeah, the one problem with PE ratio, well, it's a fine word, is that darn hyphen that we're getting, or slash that we're getting there. But what if, all right, A equals 4, APE, P twiddle A, something like serape and pairs. That is definitely the best of those. All right, so I'm going to put in serape over here. I am getting a little annoyed with all these opening new windows. It looks like I just have one last thing to do, and that's the magenta word. And I might, there's not much that goes S blank 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 O, but what we can do now is we can say that we have A, call this one B, and call this one C. B and C are both single letters. A is 2 letters. BC equals 2 letters. And then our words are going to be, D is either O or E, or possibly S, because we could have temps, but, or T for tempt, but I don't think those are going to actually work with the rest of the constraints. All right. So the crisscross words are going to be BCA, BC lowercase a, SBAD, and then the the snake is just going to be P, D, twiddle, A, B, C. Let's see, palette style. Could do era and set to and Potter. And just to double check, I'm going to reverse the snake. CBADP. And nothing. And a set to, I mean, I see it in crosswords all the time. It's like a fight or something. Let me just, it just seems, I mean, set to appears in a lot of crosswords and it feels like it's not really commonly used anymore. It seems like a 1930s sort of word in my mind. But it could also be a phrasal verb. So, yeah. In that case, I will put in TTER and declare the grid done. At some point later, I will look this over, make sure I don't have any unnecessary duplicates, that everything is in fact a word, and I don't have any partial words that I forgot to fill in. But I would say that for I have a 19 by 20 grid according to the counters in the upper right. I'm not sure offhand how many entries I have, but it seems like a good density here. And so I am going to leave it at that. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment and I might get back to you or answer them in the next stream. I'm now realizing that this has gone nearly 4 hours. So I'm once again back on my lengthy talking patterns. But I'll be back, I guess, in another, I don't know. I hope to be back in another 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to try to do these at least once a month now that I have settled into the new office. But thank you all for tuning in. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.